Hello everyone! Welcome to the behind the scenes of my illustration for Assault Android Cactus. First of all, if you have not played this game, I highly recommend that you check it out. Especially if you're really into, say, top-down shooters or shoot-em-ups. It's chaotic, it's addicting, it's challenging, and it's made by indie devs that have been in the game industry before. So, aside from that, I'm going to be talking about a part of the drawing that involves some spoilers from this game. All the more reason to try out Assault Android Cactus. It's mostly because there's something at the end of the game that is best experienced for yourself, so don't say I didn't warn you, okay? Okay, but aside from the game itself, let's get to know how I made this illustration. If you saw the speed drawing video itself, you would know that it took almost 14 hours to make. That's the most time I've ever spent on a single illustration where I have been gauging my time on. So as a matter of fact, only 4 of those hours spent on drawing were actually screen recorded for the sake of the speed drawing video. So whether or not I have recorded 4 hours of the drawing or even 10 hours of the drawing, there was no way that I would be able to show you the entirety of the drawing process in a video that's under 10 minutes. One last thing to mention before I get started on getting into the nitty-gritty of this drawing is it has to do with why this took me so long to finish this image. This Photoshop document has almost 90 layers in here. Now at the bottom here is all the trace layers. That's about 20 trace layers down here. There's more layers than an ogre with an onion can shake a stick at. Like, seriously, this is probably the most I've ever done in one single Photoshop document. In fact, there's so many of these layers in here that I have to color code them, which Photoshop CS6 thankfully has. So the first thing that I do with any sort of digital drawing that I do is that I make some drafting layers. It gets started as early as what you're seeing here being the pose layers. The only purpose that these pose layers serve is to fully flesh out the basic body pose that I want or want to utilize for each character. For the human-like characters, that being the androids, they're pretty much the easiest ones to do, since you know, you can just draw head, arms, legs, everything. That's pretty easy to do, and I don't have to worry too much about details. So that's why all their faces have plus signs on them instead. And of course, when it comes to the section words, that's a little different. Like, I just nailed down the basic bodily proportions for, say, Embryo, Justice, and Vespula. And Medulla, well, she's just a big old eye, and that's pretty much what she is anyway, right? The trace layers is actually the second draft of the image, which, yeah, here we go. These are the trace layers right here. Now, of course, it's a little hard to tell since they're all on their own separate layers, and they're all transparent, and they're all kind of conflicting with each other. It looks a little cluttered when you enable all of the layers together over here. But maybe say, let's just only show the androids. Even the oh, can't forget about Cactus. It's a little cluttered in of itself, especially when you just are showing the androids themselves. But all I'm doing here is that when it comes to setting up the trace layers, that being the second draft that I just mentioned, all I'm doing here is trying to set up what I think or what I want to be able to have these characters look like when I do a final line art pass. So what I do in this this layer, I have a drawing utility known as Lazy Nezumi. I have it in mini mode right here for the sake of ease and accessibility. What I do is that I don't have any specific line stabilization enabled. So what I can do, what I tend to do whenever I do the trace layers is that I just freely draw what I want the line art to look like without any sort of stabilization, not worrying about finer details like straight lines or perfectly curved lines or stuff like that, but at least as close as I possibly could get to the final line art pass. Now when it comes to doing the line art, and sometimes I tend to do this in the tracing layers, I would choose colors other than blue if it comes to tracing, or colors other than black if I'm actually doing the line art itself, if I want to be able to have colors that differ. Basically anything other than black is what I'm trying to get at. So let's look at Embryo, for example. All of the red trimming that you see here, that too was also like a brighter red when I was trying to set that up beforehand, along with the rest of the line arts before doing coloring. And I kind of did the same thing with the light effects over here. So like his eye, all of these other spots are also cyan as well. That's for the light effects, which I will definitely show when it comes to some of the special effects that I've done in this image. And sometimes I do other colors like indigo, like when I was doing the wires in the middle of his chest right here. And I think I did a little bit of blue as well. And you know what? I might as well talk about the coloring while I'm at it. When it comes to coloring all of these characters, in the case of this image, I like to collect a totally different Photoshop document that recollects or recollects all of the images that I need in order to properly color these characters. In the case of Assault Android Cactus, I gathered images that I could find off of the internet, which I believe was from the game's official blog. For sure, these 4 images up here that show the 4 androids that I included in the image, those were pulled off the internet. Everything else, I had to actually take as screenshots from the game itself. See, another benefit of actually being able to do this is that, say, maybe you played the game all the way through and you're like, oh man, this game's amazing, I can make some artwork about it. This makes it very helpful to be able to turn to the game that you own on, say, your computer, if you want to be able to gather screenshots in-game of the characters in here. Gathering screenshots of all the section words helped me out with not just setting up the line art for all of them, but also for gathering the colors as well. This is not the first time I've set up a document like this before for my illustrations like this. As a matter of fact, if I'm actually recording the act of coloring these characters, it's a good idea to have all of this stuff on one Photoshop document. Could say, I can take this out of here, out of the main window, and put it on my secondary monitor. I could just be coloring my way on this main monitor, picking up some colors on the other monitor, and you guys wouldn't even know it. I've realized that if I have this document and the other document in the same window, and if I switch between each one of them and record all that, when I actually speed up that footage, there seems to be a flickering effect. Not only does it mess with my eyes a little bit, but I know that it will not bode well with anyone that has epilepsy. So that's another plus right there. These kinds of documents tend to be a little more organized than any other image that I've done, because say, look at what I've done for Undertale. All these characters are all bunched up together like this, and I kind of did the same thing with the reference images for Undertale as well. I did the same thing with the Shovel Knight image. As you can see, just Shovel Knight, Shield Knight. And I also bunched up all of the Order of No Quarter over here on this side, and the Enchantress is over here. I kind of did the same thing with the reference images, because as you can see, there's Shovel Knight, Shield Knight, all the Order of No Quarter, and the Enchantress. So out of all the characters on this image right here, there's at least 2 of them that I approached differently. Justice, for example, is done with a line of symmetry. You probably saw a little bit of this in the speed drawing, where I was drawing half of Justice here, and then all I did was select all that one half that I already drew up, copied and reflected it, and then put the pieces together. If I'm not counting Medua, Justice is probably the only character that I did with a line of symmetry. It's not the first time I did that. I actually did that in Cryptid the Necrodancer with the Necrodancer himself. Like, he's actually done with a line of symmetry as well. You know, doing a line of symmetry can really help you, especially if you want to make one side of the image be consistent on the other side. Whereas if you did attempt to try to draw both sides traditionally, one side could probably look a little more lopsided and not as exact as the other side. Like say I draw this ear and then I draw another ear, they don't exactly look right. And I mean, that's where doing a line of symmetry like that can really help. And like I said with Medua, it was kind of done similarly. All I did was take the concentric ellipse constrained on Lazy Nezumi, drew some circles. They were actually on separate layers before, before I merged them all together. So I drew the circles individually, made sure that they all lined up with each other, and at that point I just ended up merging the layers, and that's how we got to Medulla right here. When it came to doing the shading for all these characters, I decided that to have every character have their own shading layer. Of course, that also took a little more time to do. Unlike, say, doing Cryptid and Necrodancer over here, there's actually one collective shading layer for all of these characters over here, and I guess the Necrodancer had his own shading layer too. That's not as big of a deal as, say, all of these characters over here. And I mean, this method of shading is actually a lot easier to do, because, of course, you have all of your shading done on one layer and you're done. And of course, the way I would do this in order to do this kind of shading is have the magic wand enable contiguous and sample all layers. Well, most importantly, sample all layers. I don't have to have contiguous on at all times. And then select whatever areas I want to do some shading on a totally different layer, like brush like that. And then boom, I'm pretty much done with shading on that specific part. But yeah, if I did shading like that, it would be very important to not even move the layers again. Because say, move Cadence around, I moved her in a totally different spot, but her shading has not, so that's one big drawback. In the case of this drawing, I decided not to, although again, I said this would take more time in order to do this. Next up, we got the effects. Now, the shockwave effect over here that the androids are sitting behind is what helps separate all of these section wards over here. So if we were to take a look at all the section wards themselves, you see they actually fit together into the shockwave right here. That was done with the power of masking layers. So all I had to do was select a specific empty spot in... Ooh, that's not it. I need to select contiguous here. I need to select an empty spot here in the shockwave. Like say, I'm doing masks for justice right here. I gotta make sure I select this area whenever I have my mask layer ready. The visible area in the masking layer has to be white. So I'll just fill a bucket with white. If I did it with black, that means he will completely disappear. But white does not. And you can see here that it pretty much subtracts parts of the image of particular characters without actually deleting parts of the image. That's always very helpful, especially if you want to backtrack on the images themselves and maybe fix up some stuff that you may want to do on a particular character. So yeah, that's how I did that. Another cool thing about the bosses themselves is all of the lights that they have on them. And kind of like their own shading layers that they have, they all have their own lights layers as well. So take a look at Embryo. This is him without lights, and that's him with the lights. And they all have the same layer style that I used in Photoshop. Like, they have an inner glow, and they have an outer glow. And that was simple enough to give off that very subtle and very cool looking effect, actually, when you put it together with the shading. And the bullets from the android's guns, it's pretty simple, especially when I did the spread shot over here for Lemon and the seeker shots for Holly right here. I decided to keep it simple to have them both have the same color and to both have the same layer style. Both the spread shots and the seeker shots have a white inner glow in them, and they both have an orange outer glow, which is the exact same color as the base image themselves. As for the swarm of wasps that Vespula has always at her disposal, I decided to not spend too much time on it by drawing every single individual wasp by hand in order to fully make up a swarm. So instead, all I did was actually draw at least 2 of them, and then I just copied and pasted the rest of them. Call it lazy, but it does save me time. I also made sure to have Embryo launch some rockets from his little rocket launchers. So I drew at least 2 of these rockets individually, and on separate layers there are the rocket trails of clouds. Although doing clouds like this is pretty simple, doing clouds is actually one of my favorite things to do with a brush. Simply, all you gotta do is have a dark color over here behind, and then put a lighter color right on top of it. And you're just pretty much drawing circles all over the place. Another thing that I did for one of the section awards was for Justice and his shield over here. That's one of his notable trademarks whenever you do fight against him. He always has his own personal shield that damages you whenever you approach him. As opposed to, say, Embryo or Vespua, they just simply attack you if you get too close to them. But in order to do this, this is composed of two different layers, one of which of the shield outline over here, and that's also done with a brush effect. Or more like just a brush, and different sizes as well. Like, I want to say it's like 300 pixels, and maybe these were 200 and that was 100. I gradually went down with different colors when it came to doing some of these little outlines here. And then for the bubble itself, I did a little radial gradient. It's at a 40% opacity. This is kind of what it looks like with full-on opacity. So it's fairly subtle, but it does kind of show off his shield a bit. One of the last things that I'll show you before I dive into spoiler territory is the background. You don't get to see too much of it, well, because all the other characters are pretty much covering up this entire arena over here. And of course, I simply decided to make this a more circular arena, kind of like what you always fight all the bosses in. So this arena itself is composed of four, because one of them is actually shading for the arena here, but it's mainly composed of 3 layers, that being the red lines you see here, the floor, and the wall. And what I did in order to set up all the lines over here, not just radial, but not just the ones that look kind of radial-like, but also the ones that are spreading out or all converging onto this point right here. That's all done with the concentric ellipse tool on Lazy Nezumi, and also with the radial lines tool as well. Kind of gives off that sense that everything's all converging in here. Now, to finish off this behind-the-scenes video, I'm going to take a look at what the assets I put together for the alternate image, well, more like alternate version of this image here. That involves the spoiler-worthy section, actually. So again, I'm going to give you one last warning. If you have not played the game, please do it. And if you have, great. I'm going to get right into it. You have been warned. Okay, so this is what all the layers are used to make up the alternate image, that being the ether sphere. So as you can see here, there's several differences between the environment, the characters themselves, and what the area is composed of, as kind of like the background as well. First of all 4 androids have some very shocked expressions on their faces. In order to pull that off, I decided to set up a totally separate layer for their scared expression, so I can switch between this and that and this and that for Lemon, or maybe even for Holly. Even though she's a little freaked out right there, anyway, she's even more freaked out with that that alternate face image right there. You know how I pulled this off? All I did was select parts of the face here, including parts of the eyes and the nose and the mouth, and went on to another layer, filled it with their skin tone, and just totally drew a totally different face on there. Medulla also had some assets reused. All I did was duplicate the layer for Medulla and took off all the colors, changed the liner to blue shades over here, shades of blue. I only did this just to make her look more holographic, just like the rest of these hologram enemies over here. And she also has a little yellow core in the middle of her, which I believe is what allows her to activate the ether sphere in the first place. So I had to make sure to include that behind this hologram in of itself here. Now, the holograms themselves, all I did was I mostly use the isometric constraint from Lazy Nezumi, especially when it came to drawing the cubes over here. That, or I actually just drew a line and copied and pasted that very same line in order to form sides of a square or maybe size of a square for these little shooters, or maybe the big old cubic like bombs. Everything else are probably free-handed, like these triangular ones that charge at you in game, and these laser shooting ones are also triangular. Like, I also filled them in with kind of a light blue color, but at a low opacity. So I had to go up to this text box right here, or this toolbox at the top of the screen, and adjust the opacity. I believe that I set it to 50 or something. As for the crossing beams of lasers that I have over here, all I did was draw one over here. I mostly used the gradient tool. This was at first 2 separate layers. So one layer was the start of the beam, which was just a radial gradient, and then the other was actually a reflected gradient. But yeah, in order to give off the illusion that the beam is coming from this center point right here, I had to take the what I did with the reflected gradient and apply a mask layer to it. So if I disabled the mask layer over here, it actually goes straight through as a gradient should. But if I re-enable it again, it looks as though it does have a definite starting point. I kind of did the same thing with the rest of the holograms. Like, I just made sure, first of all, I made sure all of the things I wanted to have set up were all in one layer. I merged them all, and then copied and pasted on the other side, and of course, I made sure that was mirrored as well when I was setting it up. As for the background itself, I'm gonna get right into that a little bit. So if you notice here, the floor, which is more of a wireframe floor as opposed to a solid floor, this was reused from one of the floor layers from the original arena from the main image. All I did was copy, or duplicated the layer actually. I duplicated this layer, removed all the colors, and changed the liner to a more purple-like color. And then there's like 4 different layers, all in different colors, that make up the space clouds over here that surround the very bottom of the arena over here. That was done with a 1000 pixel brush. Same thing kind of was going with the stars that I do. Whenever I do stars, I do use a brush layer as well, and I I am actually doing them. All I do is do one click or maybe one tap on the on my drawing tablet, and I do it at varying pressures in order to give off more of a variety of sizes of stars over here. And as a matter of fact, these hexagons and the digital the cyber strips that you see here that make up the walls, that was somewhat reused from the wall asset that is from the original arena. So if I enable this, this ribbon and the hexagon ribbon over here, they actually line up with the wall over here. And these walls are made up of when I was doing applying like special effects on here, they're mostly made up of outer glows and inner glows. But yeah, that about does it for my image of a solid Android Cactus. I do want to be able to do more of these behind the scenes videos, because not only are those pretty cool to do, but also when it comes to a situation like in the case of this drawing, I mean, it took me almost 14 hours to put this together. Sometimes actually setting up a behind the scenes video would be very helpful, especially if you wanted to know how our particular image was put together. So yeah, I think I want to be able to do more of these, especially for next month. There's something really cool that I want to be able to do that could warrant a behind the scenes video for that, and maybe even for next year when I start up the year of Kirby. But yeah, that's about it. If you guys like this video, you could totally express that with the YouTube like, and if you want to keep up with more of the videos, more of the speed drawing videos that I make on here, and maybe other shenanigans that I would post on here if I want to, you can go ahead and subscribe, and yeah, stay up to date with what I may have to come. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all later.